Welcome to episode 233 of the Necronoma.com. Tickets are now on sale as the official StokerCon pre-party returns. Spirited Giving, a horror-themed fundraiser, will take place May 29th at the San Diego Central Library. We will have live readings by Clay McLeod Chapman, Jamie Flanagan, Bridget D. Brave, Vincent V. Cava, Danger Slater, and I Zhang, as well as a live performance by YouTube horror narrator Mr. Creepypasta. And all of that is followed by meet and greets, book signings, photo ops, and more. All while raising money for the San Diego Library Foundation, particularly youth reading programs and the Books Unbanned initiative. If you're planning on attending StokerCon or you're in the area, you do not want to miss this event. It's going to be one hell of a night. Grab tickets now at www.spirited-giving.com and help horror leave a lasting impact on the community of San Diego. And I want to send a quick thank you to Fright Rags, one of our top sponsors for Spirited Giving 2024, May 29th, San Diego, California. Fright Rags has been bringing you the best in horror apparel and accessories since 2003, offering a wide range of products for your favorite creature features, slasher flicks, and cult classics. Officially licensed collections include titles like John Carpenter's The Thing, The Evil Dead, Creep Show, Jaws, the Halloween franchise, and so many more. Head on over to fright-rags.com. Make sure to sign up for their SMS and email newsletter to never miss a drop. Listeners get 10% off when they use the code NECRO10, all caps, at checkout. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and this is a creature feature, so obviously I'm in love with it. And I just want to point out, Don, I don't know if you're aware, the log line on the poster for this was that it was a groundbreaking movie, and that's just so wonderful to me. And another one was that it was like the best underground film, and just all these great puns. And so I just want to say, creature feature plus puns. I mean, this is already one of my favorite movies. What can I say?
All they needed was somebody having sex with. Anyway, then I know that would have been your greatest film of all time.
Snakes in your tracks. Yeah. Oh, all right. Go ahead.
So anyway, I'm Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of the podcast that you're listening to. And I want to answer a question that was never answered in this film, which is, how many cows does it take for there to be a stampede? The answer is 1. That's all you need for it to be a stampede.
Oh, man. We've already destroyed the episode before our guest has even joined. And so that's probably a new record. Maybe not. I don't know. But Chris Vander Kaay is back. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Greetings, gentlemen.
Welcome.
And I appreciate you answering the question about the stampede, because it's like that. There was a question that they asked in the animated Alice in Wonderland. They told a pun, or they told a joke, and they never gave me the punchline. And I've wondered for my entire life, and I've also wondered now how many horses or how many cows you need for a stampede. Thank you, Don. Before you signed off from the show, you gave me the answer.
If you're lucky, you can answer the other one too. All right, so Chris, I believe this is your 4th time here. You hit us with They Look Like People, which was amazing. Then you gave me what became my favorite werewolf story, The Wolf of Snow Hollow. Absolutely fantastic. And then you came back and hit us with It Paints the Sand Red. Is that the right? It stains the sand red.
Mm-hmm.
And holy shit, that was amazing. And I was like, Chris is coming back. It's going to give me some crazy ass movie I've never heard of. And instead, you gave me my favorite creature feature, and I got pure nostalgia. And I just want to congratulate you on going 4 for 4.
Well, I'm honored not only that I got to come back, but that I got to that you guys somehow held this one. You kept the pin in this grenade for such a long time. I'm so glad nobody else grabbed it, because I have a a complicated history with the Tremors. I loved it all along. When I say complicated, it's not because I don't like it. I love this movie. So I'm so glad to be able to be here and talk about it.
Awesome.
Fantastic. So let's back up for a second and let you tell our listeners a bit about yourself in case they haven't heard your 3 other episodes.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Chris Vander Kaay. I am an author, screenwriter, filmmaker. I am. If you know of me, you might know of me on Twitter, which is what I will always call it. I don't care. You can find me. CK Vander Kaay is the feed that I'm on, and I talk a lot about films. I'm a big proponent of curating obscure films, whether they be films that didn't do well a long time ago or indie films that got lost in the shuffle over the last decade or so. So one of the reasons I love coming on your show is because you let me talk about some of the smaller ones, but you also let me talk about interesting social commentary in them, which is the reason I love this show so much. But I thought for this final appearance of mine, I'm like, you know what? We're going with the biggest film I can think of that I love, and I could not believe you guys hadn't seen it. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Hell yeah. I've loved this movie most of my life, and like you, I can't believe nobody else has picked it, but I'm also glad, because saving it for the final season, or however you want to look at it, just makes all of this more fun for me. So there you go. What about you, Don? Has this been a long-time favorite? Was this a first time? Like, what's going on with you and Tremors?
I saw this, oh my gosh, back in the 90s. This is one of those movies that I distinctly remember watching with my cousins in Virginia. And I wasn't really into it at the time. And years later, I would put stuff together, and I would finally see the full movie. But I probably have not seen this movie in 20 plus years. And rewatching, I'm like, holy shit, this still hits. I mean, there's some outdated parts of it.
Sure.
But you could do a scene for scene, shot for shot remake of this film. It just put Kevin Bacon in not in Val's character, but in Fred Ward's character, or even have him be, the survivalist up there, right? You could do a shot for shot remake, because the themes, the underlying tones, the subtext, all that's there is still relevant today. I mean, you could give this movie to somebody and say, hey, this is an allegory for COVID. Hey, this is an allegory for or this is a metaphor for gun violence. This is a metaphor for, because one of the films I picked to pair with this was Godzilla -1, based off of conversation we had during that episode about how you don't know when it's going to hit. You don't know when it's going to happen. And that was exactly what I felt with this, watching this with more mature eyes, which was, you have an idea that something bad is happening, but you don't know exactly how bad, what it is, how to overcome this challenge. And that's what you see throughout this entire direction. It's like you go from one crisis, an economic crisis, as far as like these two guys wanting to be able to make money and to be able to make a living, to, oh shit, it's about a different form of survival, which it's outstanding the way it's done.
Love it.
Yeah, I love the comparison to Godzilla -1 too, because both of these movies show what it looks like from ground level when you have to deal with something that is an absolute force of nature that you're utterly unprepared for. And I love that comparison.
And no one's coming to save you.
Yeah.
Like, just the utter isolation, like, that's horror. Like, there's nobody that's coming to save you.
Yeah, that was actually an interesting observation. I've seen this movie so many times, but while I was watching it this time, the fact that there's not a single authority figure in this movie, I thought was really interesting. There's no local cop. Every movie with a town this small, there's always some, dumb sheriff or gets killed early to let you know how serious it is. We don't even get that. We have no authority figures in this at all.
Yeah. Wow,
like the closest would be like those road repair guys. That's the closest you get.
Wow. That's pretty crazy. I didn't notice that.
Yeah. I feel like so much of this movie is so uniquely captures the, I guess you would call it sort of the myth of America, of the rugged individualism of all these people that went out in the middle of nowhere and they tamed the wilderness, and the funniest thing about it is this movie is just sort of constantly pointing out man's hubris and our inability to actually deal with something when it comes along. That humanity on the timeline will survive, but individuals are stomped into the ground all the time. And this movie does a really good job of showing how that happens, I think, in an interesting way.
I think it also does a great job of showing how the only way to survive these things is to totally work together. And,
Yep. 100%.
and no matter how manly you are, or maybe you're Michael Gross, who is just such fantastic casting in this, I might add, but like maybe you're the guy with 10,000 guns and you can handle anything. No, you still need the society, no matter how small it is, to come together and work on the issues together. And another thing I want to throw in really fast with Godzilla -1, both of these movies made me care about the characters when they didn't have to. Like Godzilla movies, normally the part I hate the most is the humans. And -1, that was my favorite. Like Godzilla was a great added bonus. And that's fucking weird in itself. But then this, it's basically a horror comedy and a creature feature and all of these things that normally would say, you don't need to care about these people. And while I'm not deeply invested, they made me care a lot more than movies like this normally do.
Yeah. Well, they also did something I thought was interesting, and this is a sign from an older era, but they gave you a community, and several people in that community survived. They were not just created as fodder for the monsters to eat. You know, I mean, we lost a few characters, but there was a good handful of people left at the end of the movie, which is impressive because there was only a slightly larger handful to begin with in this entire film.
Yeah. And they do a great job of putting individuals in trouble. And then, like I said, you have to work together. And so people are saving each other. You know, I mean, we're definitely going to get into like the feminist points of this movie because the women are so strong in this. But like, even when Val is saving, I don't remember the lady's name now. Anyway, she's never
Rhonda,
just
the scientist.
Rhonda, thank you. Yeah, she's never just a damsel in distress. She saves him too. It's always like equals saving each other with everybody. And the times that people are taken, it's because nobody can get there in time, or it's so fast that the shop owner's taken out like that. You know, like I don't know. They just did a really great job of making it so. I know I keep coming back to this, but so that you had to work together to survive. And I think that says so much that we don't look at in society today. Everything's me, me, me.
Yeah. So you said something I thought was interesting, which is if you think about the movie sort of from, I guess you would call it the feminist aspects. Full disclosure, I've actually interviewed S.S. Wilson, the co-creator and co-writer of this film, and then the first four, what I consider the canonical entries in the Tremors franchise. So I interviewed him for one book, and then I was, guys, so close to the finish line on being able to get a retrospective documentary made about the film, the Tremors franchise, back in 2015. You have no idea. I got so close. I was working with Tommy Hudson, who had done Never Sleep Again, the retrospective doc about Nightmare on Elm Street, and it ultimately just ended up not coming together. But when I tell you I'm a Tremors fan, that's the level I'm talking about.
Wow.
I actually helped Conrad Bachman. He's the guy that played the doctor in this movie, the one who him and his wife disappeared underground, her inside of a car.
Right.
Yeah. So I helped him on the 25th anniversary reunion. I helped him to get together several of the cast members for a film festival that he runs in his home state. So I was all in on this franchise and this movie. And one of the things I thought was really interesting about what you were just talking about the feminist aspects, is this movie takes every single one of the tropes of the nerdy girl who becomes pretty and finds a way to use them for actual plot points, like survival plot points. I thought was really funny, really clever. The way that they got her out of her nerdy clothes, because she literally got wrapped up in barbed wire, so she had to get rid of her dumpy pants and boots, and she got into like sexy clothes, and like the whole thing of the nerdy girl with the glasses and
those pants off you. Yeah,
the stuff on her nose. Like I love the way that they used all of those beats to sort of point out to other films how lazy those people are for using those beats without having a purpose for them. And I thought that was a really clever usage there.
I love that.
Yeah. It's like when the killer's attacking and it's in the middle of the night and everybody happens to be, or at least all the camp counselors, the women camp counselors are for some reason baby dolls and G-strings.
Yeah, the way that we all sleep at night.
Yeah,
around when we're in a room with 7 other people.
Of course.
I mean, that's how I do panels at cons. So
Oh, I've heard what your panels at cons are about, so the wardrobe doesn't surprise me now.
Oh my gosh.
This is why we got kicked out of Salt Lake Comic Con or FanX or whatever it's called.
Don, you hinted at something a couple minutes ago that I think, for me, and this extends past the first Tremors, this goes into the entire series. One of the things I think that is most interesting is that commerce is actually the central villain of the entire Tremors franchise. Nearly every single bad decision that is made is driven by the desire for profit. And it's the only person that's not in it for the money is usually the hero. In this first movie, it's the scientist, right? She's the nerd. She's from the school. She's not in it. She's in it for the discovery, not for the money.
Right.
Who are the people that we lose, right? We lose Chang. We lose the dudes that are causing the construction, the progress that's happening. So it's interesting that this movie is sort of in some ways accidentally saying everybody who's trying to make a buck is the person that ends up dying as a result of it.
Oh, 1,000%. Because when I wrote down when Chang brought up or this line that he says to not Earl, to Bert, he says, bullets are bullets. And I just wrote down motherfucking capitalism and consumerism. The idea that this guy is telling you these are not the things that I need. I need these kinds. It's all bullets. But I'm like, all right, you're gonna die. And then of course when they bring up the part of the sandworm, and he immediately is like, I'll give you $10 or I'll give you $5 for it. 20. All right. 10, 15. And he sells it for 15, and it turns into I'm gonna sell in this small town a population of 14 people $3 a piece, $3 a person to come and take a picture with the the graboid that he called it. Or even the idea that discovering it's his idea. It's like, well, we discovered it, we get to name it. The whole idea of like, he wants fame, he wants money, he wants notoriety. Whereas even as you pointed out, Chris, with Rhonda, it's about furthering the scientific understanding of the world. It's not about, oh, I'm going to name it this. Oh, I discovered it. I'm going to name it a Cartersaurus or a Carter worm or something like that. There's something wrong here. We didn't figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
And fix this problem.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. They show that juxtaposition perfectly when she starts talking about this is something we've never seen. It predates the fossil record. That's how rare it is. And their reactions are immediately like, we're going to get way more than $15 for this.
Yeah.
That's all they can think about. Yeah,
I love that.
Really brilliant. It's also kind of a clever satire of the giant monster attacks the small town films from the 50s and 60s.
Yes.
They decided to do away with the radiation that causes the growth. I actually really like. I think one of the powers of this film is that even as the franchise goes on into the next 2-3 films, they don't ever really pinpoint what caused them. Like, was there a mutation? And in fact, one of them, there's a prequel that takes place in the Old West, and they're still around. So they've been around forever. And it's just that we sort of haven't run into them. And I love the idea that there's, again, taps back into that mythical America, that we've got this giant, open, untapped West that giant underground carnivorous worms could be living in, and we'd never know because there's just so much undeveloped land in our country,
Right.
I've never seen any of the other Tremors. This is the only one I've seen. And part of that was that I love this so much that I didn't want it to be ruined. But I wish that you could have seen my face just now when you said there's a Western Tremors. Like, I'm intrigued. I want to see it.
Listen, I'm going to tell you now, it's diminishing returns, and in terms of you're never going to get one as good as this one. But they are all the next 3 after this are fun. And the reason I recommend that 4th one, the prequel that's Western, is because Burt Gummer's ancestor, Hiram Gummer, who's like a dandy, is the main character and is also played by Michael Gross, and he's fantastic.
God damn it, I'm watching.
Oh, I'm watching in.
We're having a marathon this week.
I've spent a lot of this show saying I'm going to watch that movie, and I never do. And I guarantee you, I'm going to watch this movie. This sounds amazing. I can't wait.
He's the one piece that's through all 4. Michael Gross is in all 4 of them.
So much better. Yeah.
So Fred Ward only comes back for 1. We never see Kevin Bacon again until the attempted pilot that they made and didn't get picked up. What it was about 6-7 years ago. But yeah, Michael Gross stuck it all the way out.
That's amazing.
Hats off to him and his agent.
Also, Don, if you're gonna do your remake, I hope Reba McEntire still plays the same character, because I think they should still do the same good job today.
You already, well, because you know the premise of that one story that I've got on the back burner. So yeah, I could. Yeah, I will be honest. I would want Reba in this as well, but I would want her to have more of a presence, as far as like she is a central figure, because I felt like she was more ancillary, and it was kind of like, hey, we need somebody to sing a song for the movie, so let's bring Reba in, because I felt like she was overshadowed considering who she is.
Yeah, well, I just remember being angry when we didn't get a closing credit song from her like we did with LL Cool J in Deep Blue Sea. Like, what would the country version of the Deep Blue Sea? My head is like a shark's fin. What would that have been from Reba McEntire? We can only wonder.
Oh my gosh.
Now I want to see her sing a
my
song.
tongue is like a sandworm. That's the only
my
thing
tongue has tongues.
Tongue-tied. There you go. Tongue-tied. There's the song.
So, well, actually, I was going to say, so speaking of Reba McEntire and Michael Gross, I think it's interesting. This movie came out, it was shot in 89. It came out in 90. The characters they're playing, this was before the world really had a term for doomsday prepper, but that's what they were. They were preppers. And I think 100%. It's interesting, aside from people who used to, have bomb shelters because they thought, because of the Cold War, this kind of doomsday prepper didn't really exist in the public consciousness. And I think it's interesting because it became such a prevalent thing post 2000. It's interesting to see, 10, 15 years before that really became a phenomenon, seeing characters in a movie that are like, they're cliches, but they're also sort of like fully drawn characters that are in some ways more sympathetic than the actual people who later became this.
Oh, yeah. Well, and safer too. A lot of those guns are unloaded. He has to load them when he pulls them out. So, right there, he's way safer than a lot of people I know.
Oh, 100%.
I gave him full credit because I wrote down in my notes, was like, well, at least he was smart enough to, at least he's responsible enough to not give a kid a gun. And and then it gave him a gun. And I said, oh, well, shit, initially. But he even then did not give the kid a gun with bullets. And his excuse was, or his rationalization was, it got you moving, didn't it? You weren't going to stay back. I gave you the gun and you ran to safety.
That kid's dead if he stayed there.
100%. And not only that, you bring up sympathetic characters, Chris. I didn't feel anything for Melvin. I was kind of like, I don't give a shit if this kid gets killed.
Oh, 100%. Really? Which is why it's a great twist that he doesn't die, because they worked so hard to get us to hate him.
Very true.
But it's funny that you said that about Bert, because when I talked to S.S. Wilson, he said it was very important when him and Brent were writing the script. He said, Bert is going to be weird, but he's legal. Like, this is not he's not the sovereign citizen going to take a shot at the cop when he pulls up on his property guy. He's the, I want to survive whatever bad's coming our way guy. But he's not like, he's not a dude that's going to like go to war, and build his own little army. And I thought that was interesting observation from S.S. Wilson, because I think that would have been an easy direction to go with Bert. And that the fact that he didn't do that, I think was, again, it was a different time. It was before the Compound, the David Koresh thing. So it was before a lot of things that had changed our perception of, human interaction and gun ownership and standoffs and all that kind of stuff. But I did think it was an interesting sort of slightly nuanced character for what we would see were this movie to have been made now.
Oh yeah, I think he would probably be it would be really on the nose with some aspects. But one thing I that definitely supports what both of you are saying with respect to Bert is, even when they got to this moment of they were going to go to the mountains, or they're going to the mountains, and he says, we could have stayed at my compound. Like, it was fully stocked. We had food, we had gasoline, we had all that. Like, we could have hunkered down there and stayed. But then they were like, well, no, it was still gotten us. But they could have at least gotten some more of the supplies out if they had done things a different way. Or even the idea that he thinks that all this work that he's done in prepping for this type of event, it's almost the sadness that he can't use it. more so than, you know, being able to help somebody. It's the fact that he did all this work and it turned out for nothing.
That's a fantastic observation, which probably says a lot about that modern instinct for people who do it now, which is they're not really doing it to protect society overall. They're doing it so that they're safe when everything else goes to shit for everyone else, you know? It's interesting.
And what is the point of being the one to survive if you're alone, man?
Yeah. Well, I guess that's why you marry Reba McEntire, though.
Well, there is that. Anyway,
so I just have to point out this is not a social commentary observation, but I just on a strictly technical level, this is one of the most economical scripts I've ever seen in terms of how well they execute what little exposition they need in order to build characters and grow characters and build a plot. Like, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but it within the first 3 minutes of the movie, we have established the cliff, the game that they play with the fingers, the reference to the stampede, like all of the important elements we need for our final act climax have happened in 3 minutes, and all of it looked like character establishment and location establishment as opposed to plot points. It's a phenomenal piece of work that is, I think more people should look at the screenplay and screenplays like Back to the Future for how brilliantly they layer exposition and character into a story and make it look so easy, because this is a complicated thing to do and not look clunky and obvious. And they did a fantastic job.
I love that you brought up Back to the Future, because when you were talking about Michael Gross playing his ancestors, that's all I could think of. I was just picturing Seamus McFly the whole time. So.
100%. Yeah. And because that came a few years later, I would not be surprised to know that at the very least that Zemeckis must have seen this franchise, you know what I mean, has been aware of it, because I think there's some similar tropes that they nod at, some Western tropes that they nod at. So
it's pretty sweet. I'm definitely watching that movie. I mean this.
I genuinely cannot wait to hear what you guys think of that. So I'm curious, do you guys feel like this is obviously meant to be an homage to a monster movie? It's supposed to be a horror film, it's supposed to be a comedy. I find so rarely that a horror comedy is ever actually scary. It's funny, but it's rarely scary. I thought there were a couple of passages in this film that were genuinely, especially like when I was younger and saw it for the first time, it's sort of, you know, it's had the impact it's going to have now. But when I was younger, the car attack sequence is incredibly effective. Like, it really worked for me when I was a kid. That terrified me.
Oh yeah, with all the suckers on the windows, the appendages that are just there.
And then when she's screaming as we see the headlights point up into the night sky.
Yes.
And then the moment later where they hear the music and then they brush the dirt away to see the headlights pointed straight up. Like, it's amazing to me, first of all, that they were able to get that accomplished, because this was not a huge budget. But like, just the cleverness of knowing that the audience will be able to infer enough to be more terrified by that than if you'd actually seen a monster drag the vehicle underground. You know, the way that they chose each little piece that they showed you so that you completed the idea in your head as opposed to seeing it on screen. You had to do half the math of figuring out what happened.
I kind of wonder if that's what makes the terror, because you are applying that yourself. When you talk about horror comedies not being scary, horror comedies are my favorite thing. And I agree with that 100%. There are a couple scary scenes here or there, or things that make you uncomfortable, but for the most part, it doesn't hit that. And I do wonder if the way this is shot, where we're just seeing these pieces and we're adding that other part, we're not hitting it with the same tone the movie would. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Our mind is filling in what it would be like to be in that car, instead of a horror comedy trying to show us what it would be like to be in the car.
Right. Yeah, usually the comedy in horror comes from going over the top, going too far.
Yeah.
And this one, by pulling back, becomes more effective. It's a very interesting balance. I also have to point out Ron Underwood, the guy who directed this, who's probably most well known for directing the first City Slickers. He has several call outs to Jaws in this film. The POV, I don't even know how you would describe it. It's sort of a POV shot of the graboids, but we've established they don't have eyes, so I don't know actually what we're viewing through. But, you know, the shot of the moving body there, the way that Chang gets grabbed there reminds me a lot of the scene where Quinn is killed in Jaws, when he's pulled down at the bottom of the boat, the blood comes out of his mouth, the moment of shock. It feels very clear to me that Ron Underwood was like, how do we make Jaws in the dirt? Because there's so many parts that remind me of that.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're going to make anything, you're going to make homages, whether purposeful or not, to the things that influenced you. When you're talking creature features, I know I said this is my favorite or one of my favorites. Jaws is obviously the most influential. And so I think you're going to want to call that out, and you're going to want to hit that same kind of stuff. And I think that also goes to what we were just talking about with humor as well, because Jaws has a lot of points where it's not tense and it's people talking or hanging out almost. And then it hits those moments. And I think you have to do that with a horror comedy. So I would have totally looked at Jaws on how to hit those moments of surprise and pulling you back into the terror. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me that they would have, whether directly or not, done that. But I do feel it was purposeful.
Yeah. Well, and I also think they had similar things in that this was also a studio film that didn't have a ton of money to spend, but had a monster they had to figure out how to show the threat of without actually showing all that much. So like even the part where you can see the fence posts falling down as the ground descends, like that's basically just the barrels in Jaws, like how do we show an inexpensive object that stands in for the fear that we're supposed to have for the actual thing?
Yeah, and then you ramp it up even more after that, because now you realize that you're not safe anywhere. Even on the rocks, right? Because there was this idea that you needed to have solid rock underneath you. The monster can still get to you; it just can't come up from under.
Yeah, so I mean, it can make you stay there. Like the most brilliant thing they did is the first death that they encounter in any real way is the guy who climbed up in the tower and basically died of dehydration because he couldn't come down. And that was genius to have that be first, because then for the rest of the film, anytime they get someplace safe, in the back of your head, you're thinking, well, yeah, but are they stuck there? Are they just going to die there? Because it's just going to wait.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, really, really clever movie. It is funny, though. I will say one of the things that S.S. Wilson pointed out when I was interviewing about it is he said that in other sequels, he said they were always sort of in the West, in the Midwest, or and people always ask him, is like, well, when are we going to get like the graboids in a place where there's a lot of people, like in a busy area? And he goes, they're idiots. They couldn't survive there. The only reason they can live here is because they can, like, what are they going to do about concrete? You know what I mean? Like they would die. They would starve because they couldn't get up through the ground, and they would just all die. It was like, we had them where they were because that's the only place where they can thrive, because they are essentially just wild animals living in their natural habitat. So he said that whole displaced monster that gets into the big cities. So like that's an impossibility for this kind of story.
Right.
Well, and if they only go on vibration, they'd be very confused all the time.
Oh yeah. Yeah, 100%. In fact, it's funny that you said that, James, because I actually that brings up a theory that I have, which is the movie in some ways does tell you why these things showed up where they showed up. I think my theory is we see multiple different times, we see construction or repair in process, right? We see the road under repair from those guys that are doing that. We see the doctor is building the house and he's got his generator running and everything. My theory is that it's all of this rampant progressive, the progress that's happening in this area that used to be, I mean, what was there, 7 houses in this, 40-mile stretch of valley, and there hasn't really been anything there before. So these things sort of, they were bothered with people because there wasn't enough noise to get them over there. I think my theory is that man's modern technology and need to build crap everywhere is what ended up drawing them in and essentially creating a human smorgasbord for them.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
And they never come out and say that, but I feel like that's the movie kind of hinting at it, because there's also, I think, a clever way of, at the end, we kind of start to see the graboids learning from the people, because at the end, the way that the graboids stop them, get them trapped on the rocks, is they start building on their own. They start building trenches that cause the construction equipment to fall over so they can't use it anymore. So in a way, we're watching the graboids sort of slowly evolving as a result of having to interact with human evolution. And I thought that was a pretty interesting, subtle way of pointing out this is the way that the world works. That's why we see now, like, polar bears that show up on, boats and stuff because they got no place else to go because they're swimming for miles because we've melted all the ice. So they're showing up at places where people are. So this movie was kind of in some ways presupposing a lot of the weird juxtapositions of the natural world and the quote unquote human world that we're seeing more and more as we sort of ruin our own habitat.
Well, and I would think before the human aspect, if they were still there, they were probably smaller. They reacted to smaller vibrations and ate things like rabbits. Like there's no telling how much like interacting with the humans and the buildings and everything else caused this thing to get to the size that it's at, or cows or whatever else. But like if it was out there in the middle of nowhere and the humans weren't there, the vibrations it would react to would be very, very different and nobody would notice. So it could have been there, since the Old West. No, it could have been there forever. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. In fact, they even hint at it at one point. Remember when they're fishing with the dynamite, when they're dragging just that little piece of dynamite across the ground and it's only making that tiny little scuffle, it doesn't shoot up out of the ground with its, 6 mouth tentacles. It just gently opens its mouth a tiny little bit to let the thing fall in the way that I would imagine it would, to just sit near the surface and then open up just as a rabbit is running by and it would fall in. Like it wasn't a huge attack because it wasn't what it considered to be huge prey, but as its prey gets bigger, it has to change its tactics.
I like that a lot. Man,
it made me think of those trapdoor spiders that kind of do the same thing where they feel the vibrations and whatever bug, or I think some of them can get like small snakes, but whatever prey comes near them, they'll just quickly open up the trap that they set, jump on their prey and drag them in. If you haven't seen video of trapdoor spiders, it is, and I know how much you love spiders, James.
I love spiders.
It is must see footage.
Trapdoors are really cool.
Yes, I have seen it. I will not watch it again, but I have witnessed it. That was one.
It's all good.
I'm curious. Did you guys get any? I got a little bit of a some of the roving camera POV and the ramp speed shots and close-ups. Like I got a little bit of a Sam Raimi vibe off of some of the scenes in this movie, like the early Raimi. Like post Dead, but like I guess you know what it is. It's Darkman energy, is what it is. Like that's some of the sequences had that like manic energy, and I really like that, which I haven't really seen much else that Ron Underwood has done, because most of the rest of his stuff is a little more mainstream. But I really like that energy in some of those sequences where they would do a rack pull onto Kevin Bacon's face. They would zoom in at the same time that they were pulling the camera out and stuff like that. There's a lot of fun pieces like that.
Yeah. Now that you're mentioning it, I definitely kind of see those comparisons. But I guess in the moment, I didn't overly think Raimi. I just thought they were really cool shots. But also, that kind of goes into that horror comedy thing. Like, Raimi obviously has some horror comedy moments with his shots. And so much of that is just playing with things that people don't normally do with the camera.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that it was more that for me. It was more, it's a horror comedy thing, but it just looked extra cool in this one. And I chalked that up more to like the practical effects versus the years and years we've spent getting CGI and such.
That's interesting.
But yeah, I love that you said that, because now I'm thinking about it that way.
Well, but what you said, that it made me think you're right. I think it does have more to do with that that heightened sort of pitched reality, because another movie that occurred to me as you were talking was Barry Sonnenfeld was a cinematographer for a short time before he became a director, and one of the films he was cinematographer for before he went and made Addams Family was Raising Arizona, and that movie has a similar energy, like a sort of a Raimi, zany, like almost sort of live action Looney Tunes vibe, which this movie doesn't go quite that far, but there is still some like connective tissue there. And they're both also coming out sort of in a similar era. I think Raising Arizona would have been maybe 2-3 years earlier, but
yeah, definitely see those connections with those.
I think I'm going to switch my double feature now, and it's going to be Raising Arizona, just so I can ruin the surprise, because that's way
only if you sing the song.
No. All right, continue. What were you going to say, Chris?
No, I was just going to say it's interesting because they also both have very similar backdrops. They're both sort of like desert stories. One is Texas, obviously, but they're both sort of like, Midwest, endless flat landscape as far as the eye can see. Is pretty interesting. But I was also going to say, I thought that was it was only this time that I noticed that what we're watching is technically a first contact story. We're seeing two species that have likely lived here for a long time and never run into each other before, except for in, isolated situations that probably ended in one or both of their deaths. But this is the sort of a non-science fiction version of a first contact story.
That's kind of cool.
God, I didn't even think about it then.
You're blowing my mind here.
All right, and the movie recommendation list is only getting longer.
If you could just record that separately and send it to me. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, yeah. I think one of the things that's fun about this movie is the juxtaposition of really smart stuff, subtle storytelling stuff, and then alongside some of the funniest, dumbest shit imaginable. Like, I have not laughed as hard as I laughed when Walter comes out as they're getting ready to get mount up on horseback to leave, and his line is, "Here's some Swiss cheese and some bullets." I don't know why that line. I think it's because the bullets come after the Swiss cheese. That there's something really funny about the order of that. Like that. Why was Swiss cheese the priority of the things that you were handing them?
If you said bullets first, you might think that's how the holes got in the cheese. So he was just trying to tone that down.
It's misleading otherwise. But yeah, that line, and then there's a line later where I forget who it is that says it, but they're talking about, she's talking about how they don't see, they feel vibrations, and then that one guy, his suggestion was like, hey, so like we don't vibrate, right? Like that's genius. Of course, why didn't we think of that? Let's just not vibrate. That solves all of our problems.
It's even those moments where like Val and Earl are discussing the plan and going back and forth, and Rhonda's just back there taking care of shit. She's like, you know what, fuck it, I'll just do it, while they're still arguing over how to do things. And I thought it was well done because it's not just that, oh, they're dumb hicks and she's smart. It's just real. It's just that thing where two people get distracted and aren't listening to the third. You know what I mean? It's just wonderful.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely some strong Big Trouble in Little China energy there, right?
Yes.
Where they definitely think they're the main characters, but she's actually the hero. Just like Jack Burton thinks he's the hero, but it's actually Egg that's the hero in Big Trouble in Little China, and Jack is along for the journey and just assumes he's supposed to be the hero.
Yep. And we got to save her because she's a girl. So.
Oh man, and I love the running joke of every time there might be a moment between her and Kevin Bacon, they like glance just off screen, and Fred Ward is just staring at them, grinning from ear to ear.
He's fantastic in this.
Yeah, no, this is I've always loved Fred Ward, but this is his finest hour for sure. Kevin Bacon has had many great hours since then, and so has Fred Ward, but I don't think I've ever liked a character Fred Ward has played more than this one.
I'll be honest, as soon as he came on screen, I was like, oh, sweet, Joe Dirt's dad. And
the most obvious reference. I did think it was funny too. The first time that we meet Val and Earl, like it's a great comedy image, and this is beautiful landscape, and it moves immediately into sort of the joke about the stampede. But I remember just thinking that, like, right off the bat, I was like, do these guys not have a home? Are they just like the monster movie version of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern? Like they just wander around in through other people's narratives and they don't really have a thing of their own, because they literally were living out of the back of a truck, like literally out of the back of the truck. That's where they were both sleeping.
Yeah.
So there's no impression I get whatsoever that they actually have a home, because otherwise why would they sleep where they slept?
They really liked each other. That's why he's always looking when Val's talking to that girl.
There it is. So yeah, there's some deep stuff going on with Fred Ward's character in that scene. He's happy, but also heartbroken.
Now that I've pissed off half the Tremors fan club. Oh, anyway.
You think they haven't shipped those two before, James?
Yeah,
you think they haven't shipped?
I would. I liked them together. They have good chemistry. They'd be fine together.
I'm sure there's a nice fan fiction out there about them.
I'm going to find that too.
Yeah, well, loop me out of that email chain if you don't mind. I did. You know what? This is funny. This is, this crops up a lot in horror movies, but this is one of those films that literally absolutely could not happen in the age of cell phones and the internet. You know what I mean? Like the only reason that these people, they could have called somebody while sitting on a rock and then someone could have flown in. And it's fascinating, like watching the technology in this one, how they had to use a CB radio to call Bert, who was across the valley, and when you think about the idea of how much more technology we have in our pocket right now than that entire town had combined, it's one of the reasons why I think it's so hard for people to come up with really solid, original, scary isolation stories anymore that take place in the modern time. It's because of stuff like that. Those problems are very easily solved now.
Well, I think it would be possible to do it with cell phones, at least in today's age, right? Let's just say Melvin, or even the young lady who was on the pogo stick, which I still thought was an odd choice after they knew how the monster was operating.
That
you would
seems
allow
so fun. I don't even care.
You would just allow your child out. Maybe I'm just a little bit too protective. But anyway, what was I talking about? Melvin. If this were up to date, 2020, 2024, 2030, I don't know what technology is going to look like, but he's on social media. He's trying to be famous, like Bert. Bert from Violent Night, where he's just doing TikToks and Facebook and whatever, and he hates being in a small area. He sees the monster, takes a video of it, and people are like, "Oh, that's bullshit, man. That's AI. You guys did it." So you could honestly present it as if it's happening. Nobody believes it's happening. The one dopey sheriff or the deputy shows up. He gets eaten on the way. Then they're completely cut off. Nobody's believing it. No police are coming to save them. It's possible to still do it.
Yeah, that's a fair point. In fact, if nothing else, this movie would be more about the wedges that we drive between ourselves because of misinformation, where no one would believe that it's actually happening.
And I say that because, even Get Out, Nope ran into that as far as are people going to believe us when they see this? People might think it's fake. Might think that it's CGI or special effects or something. But yeah, I think you could make this today and address those issues at the onset, as far as what you talked about, where within the first 3 to 5 minutes, you've already established so many things that are going to be called back, where you immediately do it, have it addressed, and this just takes over the course of maybe a few hours, not even stretch it out a few days. It's just it's several hours in which this has been taking place. So there's not a thing of, oh, well, nobody's, somebody from the nearest town, they would have to know that something's going on out here. They should come and check on us.
I would actually love that. It would take them forever to get out there, and then as soon as they arrive, boom,
it's over.
Get eaten. Just like Dick Halloran all over again.
Or even better, they show up after the story has already completed. They show up to save the day, and the only 3 people that survived are like, "Where the hell have you guys been?"
Yeah.
We stopped for ice cream.
I think this movie also represents something kind of interesting to me because of when it came out. Because it came out in 1990. It was at the end of the 80s when it was being made. And it kind of feels like it marks the end of an era in some ways. This movie is sort of a big scale, quirky hybrid genre movie, and it's not based on any previous IP. And it feels like this was sort of not this necessarily a film by itself, but this era, this first couple of years of the 90s is when that kind of stuff started to die, because Batman came out the year before. 2 years later, it would be Jurassic Park. And then we ushered in the era that was the beginning of adaptations and sequels and remakes. And it feels like this movie in some ways is one of the last gasps of the industry being willing to bet on a big thing that's kind of weird, that's not based on another thing, that didn't come from a previous success. And that's sad. It makes me sad because of how good this movie is, and that it absolutely was a chance that it took. And the irony, of course, is that Universal, that owns this property, they could be taking chances like this, but instead we got, 3-4 years ago, the 7th or 8th entry in the Tremors franchise that they're still pumping out direct to video, starring Jamie Kennedy and Michael Gross, who's still on board because you got to pay the bills.
He's still on board. This is the best news I've ever had.
7 of them. I think he died in maybe the second to last one. I can't remember. It's not a spoiler alert because I think I'm guessing based on fuzzy information. But I mean, he stuck it out through like 6 or 7 movies. And the irony is, like I said, they're still making money off the Tremors franchise now in the the early 2020s. And they're making money on that franchise now. Why doesn't it occur to them that they could be building franchises that are still doing that instead of only milking old things, you know?
Even if they would do half and half, I would get it.
Exactly. I mean,
but it's so lazy. It's just about today. There's no thought for the future at all.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it is. It's super depressing because it does feel like this movie, as great as it is, it feels like a bellwether of an era and a style of filmmaking we're in all likelihood never going to get back to. Like I don't know how we get there unless something really disastrous happens to the film industry itself in some way, you know, because they're not just going to naturally fold back and just go, oh, you know what, that was a good idea. What we did 40 years ago was a good idea. Let's see if we can swing back around and give that a try again. So it sucks because it only means one of two things. There's going to be some sort of horrible implosion that gets us back to reasonably priced original, you know, mid-budget movies, or we're just not going to get them again.
Well, and part of that is what we support on opening weekend. And that's not going to change. No matter how many of us go, I'm going to sit out Marvel for 3 weeks and then go when it doesn't matter as much so I can still see it. It's going to be sold out. It doesn't matter if we're there or not. Right. And what they see is when we make these IP movies, we sell out theater after theater. And when we make something new, people trickle in. And so while we can't take away from Marvel or whoever else, support small films. Any small film you want to see it opening weekend because it fucking matters.
Yep, 100%. And the irony of what you just said is like that's the way that they want to. The way they want to move forward is they want to just keep making profits off of things that were previously successful. But if they're never going to make another thing that hasn't previously been successful, they're only ever going to have like 6 franchises anymore. Yep. You know. The irony is that Tremors was only a modest hit at the box office. It didn't do all that well, but it ended up becoming one of the most rented films of 1990 because of VHS. So the fact that they could have looked at that as a disappointment in one medium ended up becoming a huge thing in another medium. And that's why there are 7 Tremors films, because people started renting the first one because it became a huge cult hit. So yeah, I mean, it's a depressing reality that people who make movies now, or at least the people who approve movies, sorry if we ended up in a tangent, in a cul-de-sac of depression in the midst of this great movie conversation.
They're all used to that.
But what's depressing about it is that it used to be, at least if a studio had a movie that was a bomb, they were bummed about it because they wanted to make money, but they also kind of liked movies. That's why they would back movies. They'd be like, I think this will probably be a success and it'll also be a good movie. And then when it's not a success, you could say, well, that sucks, but it is a good movie.
Right.
That's not true anymore. It has to be a success because most movies are not all that good. And I mean, when you're talking on the level of what we get on on mainstream fare, a lot of it is middling. And so if it's not a success, it's absolutely worthless. And that's really depressing to think about because we're not creating a generation of movies that are going to become successful later on home video, except in the independent market where places are not being, studios aren't supporting them,
Yeah, 100%. And I am depressed now.
Well, then to swing it back around, there was one other note I wanted to say that I thought was genius, which is the mislead that this movie pulls is like hat tip to this film. It's absolute genius. The idea that for the first half hour of this movie, we think that the worms are those little things that were attached to the back of the truck.
Right.
Genius. It is a genius mislead, man. And then when you find out that thing is just the tongue of a bigger thing, what a brilliant reveal. Like that part where they were like, oh my God, there must be a million of them under there. And then it pops up and he goes, nope, just one big one. Such a great reveal. Like I can't imagine, like, they didn't spoil it in the marketing. If you watch the ads, they didn't spoil that moment. I don't think movies nowadays would have the balls to do that, where they would keep that secret from you for a full half hour to get into the film because they'd want to show you the world's giant carnivorous worm, And I just love it. It was such a fantastic mislead, man. I thought that was really brilliant.
That's really great.
And I'll say, having not seen the movie in well over 20 years, I completely forgot that they were that size. So when it first showed up on that axle, I was thinking like, oh, it's a baby one. Because I immediately I forgot so much about this movie that when that scene hit, yeah, I fell into the same mentality as the characters, and I was confused because oh well, then there's a bigger one that's going to be coming to the town that's going to start shit. And when they realized it, for me, I was realizing it again. I'm like, oh shit, that's right, because they were part of the tongue and they did this, and it was kind of like the thing in Aliens where it reached in and would grab you. I'm like, they fucking got me, and I saw this movie.
That's how good it was. Well, listen,
Pardon my French.
I envy you having forgotten this film, because being able to experience it as if it's the first time again must have been a fantastic pleasure. Every time I watch it, I try to watch it with someone who either hasn't seen it or hasn't seen it in a long time, because the joys of watching, like I watched it with a friend of mine this time, and one of the things he noticed was that this was in the 90s. There was a male-male relationship where they were both masculine dudes, but there was no sort of like, I mean, aside from the arc of Kevin Bacon wanting like, his cliched expectation of what a girl should be versus what a real woman should be, but like it was mostly a non-toxic relationship between them. They were friends, and they would give each other a hard time, but Fred Ward was like a great and capable mentor who was trying to steer him towards a decent relationship with a wholesome woman who actually had something other than just looks. And it was,
it's like a hopeless romantic watching it. He's like, go for her. Like, oh my God. Yeah. Continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think like in the late 80s, early 90s, it's crazy to think about. That's so rare, like that vibe from guys. And that, I mean, we're only like 2 years removed from like the date rapey style jokes that came out in like, Revenge of the Nerds. You know what I mean?
Right.
So to see this kind of representation for dudes who are mostly not toxic, and the one dude who does have one toxic trait sort of gets beaten out of him by reality of life, Yeah.
Well, and even with that, you talk about I put insecure masculinity. You see that represented as well, where at the end, Val is going to talk to Rhonda, and you hear him talking to himself like, what does she want with a guy like me? She's studying for her PhD. And then he just goes and talks, because he realizes like, I'm not good enough for her, and I've been covering up with Fred Ward's character, with our conversations, like, oh man, she got to have legs, she got to do this, she got to do this. But it also presents this idea that a lot of men have, which is if a woman has something that is better than you, then somehow that invalidates your manhood. And there's that one scene where Fred Ward's character, when Rhonda states, oh, well, have any of you pole vaulted before? We can just go from rock to rock. And he's just like, and the attitude he has is like, oh, this is easy. So I wrote down, I was like, oh no, a woman can do something, so it must be easy. Mm-hmm. And he falls on his ass. She does it correctly the first time. He falls on his ass. And of course, Val looks at him like, dumbass. And his ego is bruised, but it's not damaged, because he's kind of like, he's just been put in his place by gravity.
Yeah, no, that's a great observation, actually. And the thing about his, I guess you would call it the standard that he was looking for in a girlfriend. The irony is that by the end of the movie, it's not that he's accepting that she's pretty in a different way. It's that he's recognizing that he only ever created that false impression because he was hiding from the fact that he needed a bimbo, because he didn't think very much of himself on a level of like intelligence and capability. And so he had an assumption of, here's the kind of woman that would be with me, so here's who I'm looking for. And at the end, when he realizes like that he can overcome his shortcomings by just recognizing that he has them, and then being willing to be vulnerable in front of her, like that's actually it's kind of genius that they found a way to put a story in like that in an era where none of this stuff was a conversation. Nobody was talking about that kind of stuff then.
I like how you just taught a lesson that men everywhere need to learn, and you did it in like 3 seconds. And I don't even know if you noticed that you did it. That was amazing.
I mean, obviously I'm going to say I did, so it sounds like I'm smart. I mean, yeah, that's why I
No,
showed
but-
up, and I chose Tremors just so that I could get a bunch of
Yes.
angsty dudes up in here to listen to me preach.
No, but
somebody else is
really,
going to be on Reddit.
they don't know about that. The Flanagan episode hasn't come out yet.
No, I just mean in general. Somebody else is going to be on Reddit to be complained about.
No, but no, legitimately, that's such a strong thing to say, that the way to get over it is to recognize it. Holy shit. Like, that should be taught in schools right there.
Listen, I am all for putting Tremors on curriculum in this nationwide. So
make it happen, people.
You got my support.
Oh man. One thing that I overly love about this movie is that it's almost all during the day. I think it's all during the day. There might be a couple night shots. I don't remember, but I love daytime horror. I love the movie Tucker and Dale versus Evil, and so much of the good stuff happens during the day. And I just love horror that takes place during the day because, number one, I'm afraid of everything all the time. It doesn't matter if it's dark outside. I'm not afraid of the dark. The dark increases my fear. There is a difference. And I'm terrified of shit during the day. And it bugs the hell out of me that horror doesn't do a lot of daytime horror stuff. Number two, I don't know if you've tried watching a movie in the last 10 years, but I can't see shit that's on the screen at any time. So daytime horror is the greatest thing in the world to me.
100%. I totally agree with you for both of those reasons. But the first one that you said is really funny. I always used to say, I'm not scared of the dark. I'm scared of the thing that can get closer to me in the dark because I didn't see it.
It's so true.
But yeah, I agree with you. I don't know what happened. You look at this movie, and it wasn't hugely expensive, and it came out in the 1990s. But it was, it was a shot on film movie that was made by a competent journeyman filmmaker. And why does this look better than anything that is coming out right now? Like, we should be embarrassed as an art form that, like, most of the movies from 1989 and 1990 look effortlessly better than almost anything that is coming out within the last few years. Art forms are supposed to improve. They're not supposed to devolve. And I don't know what has happened, but we've lost the skill to do so many things. And I wonder, part of it, they had to work harder to make a movie, meaning you can't just shoot everything in front of a blank wall and plug it in later. And so there was a level of effort that went into every moment because they knew we're only going to get this sandworm to pop up out of here one time. And then Jim and his crew are going to have to come back over and cover it all back up practically with dirt again, that this one's got to be the one. We've got to deliver it. It's got to be great. So maybe there's some energy to that. But there absolutely is some truth to be had for the idea that films from, 30 plus years ago were just better at doing what they do than we seem to be now.
Yeah. And I do feel like the fact that you can just do it in front of a green screen is a huge part of that because people don't care as much. I'm not saying that you need one of those directors who does 140 takes of every single shot, but there is something about truly caring and not worrying that someone else has to fix it later. Because even if that guy's great at his job, you're not going to get that same vision that one person getting the shot right has.
Yeah. That's a great point. Not to mention, why do you want to offload so much of your responsibility for how the movie comes out to other people who were not there on the day and didn't have the same emotional inspiration or whatever? How much do we really want to offload the creativity of our work to other people who will just deal with it later? There is something that feels like an abdication of your responsibility as an artist to that,
Yeah.
Boy, we went some places with this giant worm movie, huh?
Right. And now we're going to get even worse and be like, what if we just tell this computer to make the whole thing without us doing anything?
Because if there's one thing I want, it's the computer that doesn't do effects very well to also write the story.
Well, the computer's too busy trying to sell Willy Wonka experiences.
Oh, man. I don't know how long that's going to be in the zeitgeist. And in 2 years, when someone is listening to this, I hope they're going onto Google right now and looking up quarter cup of lemonade and one jelly bean to see if they can find the story that we're talking about, because man, what an enjoyable I don't know what you would call it. What an enjoyable car crash that this is to witness in real time.
Well, as long as you're going down Google rabbit holes many years from now, please go look up the ball pit at DashCon and look up Bert is Evil. Those are like my two favorite things ever.
Nice. See, we're creating like these ghost viralities that will pop up in a few years when someone's listening back, and then we're going to see like, oh, weird. This is trending on Twitter for some strange reason. Kind of like Megan is Missing, that movie that just suddenly cropped up on TikTok and everybody's talking about it. We're going to be creating those for other people in a couple of years.
Love it. What a good job.
I was going to say, the only complaint I have about this movie.
Oh, tread carefully, Don.
No. This is a real world complaint. This is my neuro spiciness, leading into the movie. I sat there, the part where Bert and Reba, I'm not going to call her by the movie's name. James knows why. The scene where Bert and Reba are just shooting up the entire rec room.
Yes.
I thought to myself two things. One, they're going to be deaf. And two, I better see their ears bleeding or I'm just suspending all sense of reality. Forget about the sandworms, forget about the graboids, forget about any of the other weird stuff that's going on. You need to have those ears bleeding because they should not be able to hear. They're encased in a cinder block room. that sound is going to be bouncing off the walls.
Oh my gosh.
And destroying their ears. But that was the one part that got me. I was like, he's a gun enthusiast. He knows that you don't shoot in there. And if you're going to shoot, he should have put his ear pros on while he's in there. I was so angry as a gun owner.
That would have been so great just to take the 4 seconds to walk over there and put them on.
Oh, yeah. As a giant carnivorous worm smashing through the wall.
Yeah. I got it. Just hang on a second.
I would, because that would add to the comedy. It's
Safety
like, wait. Okay, yes, they're these big, weird beasts, but damn it, I am not going to suffer hearing damage over this.
So, Don, I have to ask you, as someone who has never fired a gun, let alone owned one, what were they doing with the bullets that were in that thing they put in that started vibrating that caused the worms to come to them in the first place? What was that?
That was to clean the spent ammo. That's really, if that's the hopper I'm thinking it was the spent shell casings, and they were putting them in there in the hopper to pre-process. Because it also strikes me as odd that Bert would be buying bullets instead of making his own bullets, because he had all the machinery in his gun room or whatever that was.
Okay. I always wondered that because I'm like, I don't know what that machine is. He could be making a daiquiri for all I know out of bullets. I have no idea what's happening. So I'm glad to know. You've solved 2 questions for me today, Don. Thank you for that.
Well, I could be wrong because I saw her when she did it, and I know it's a bullet popper, but it's normally to like clean any debris off of it. If that makes sense. I've never used one. I just know what they're supposed to do, but the one that they were using, it just uses sand to like knock the sand and small rocks to knock anything off of the brass, so you can reuse it.
Fair enough.
So you can reprocess it for to make bullets out of them.
See, this is the incisive social commentary that people come to this show for.
This and the big jokes.
I do have to say the one last observation I had, which I liked, was that this was not a town that was solely just like crazy redneck white people, like the whole town was like blue collar, but like different careers. You had your farmers, your shop owners, your road workers, but then also there was like, they had several Hispanic locals. They had an Asian immigrant. I like the idea that it felt like a smaller version, but like a diverse version of an American town, as opposed to nowadays. I think it probably would be like the girl from the college would probably be a black girl, and everybody would think she was weird for being in town because they'd all be like sort of crazy rednecks, and then they'd all have to learn to accept her because she's so smart and she helps them all out. Like it would be like that simple cliche. And I really like the nuance of the way they constructed it here, where it makes sense why all these people are here, but it doesn't feel like it's a situation where, it was a, everybody stares at Walter like, what the hell's he doing here? Or like there's a division between the Mexican immigrants versus the white people. I kind of liked that it was sort of just quietly in like a standard progressive neighborhood,
Maybe that's another reason they don't want to call the nearest city. Like they're like, oh, we don't like those city people. They're trying to ruin our perfect little town. That's why it's called what it's called.
I mean, Bert definitely does seem like the kind of guy that says the word government, not government. Yeah, he puts a B in there.
An extra B for Bert. I like that he never tries to take charge. I know we already kind of mentioned that, but I really expect when I see a character like his that he's going to claim authority at some point and then he's got the guns to back it up, and I like that doesn't really happen.
That's true. And the only point where he really sort of comes at Val at all about it, and when they're on the rocks, he kind of just is like, he's a little pissy and he turns away. And it's like Reba McEntire's the one that has to be the adult. And she's like, no, it's all right. Calm down. Yeah, I know. He thinks he knows everything. I thought that was a really sweet
yeah.
When you kind of see like, oh no, she's the one that like keeps the peace here. Like he's probably a little nutty and she's sort of maybe the one with the pants in the family here.
It was also just, it felt very real small town thing to say. Like just he thinks he knows everything. Like it's this shot at him to appease Bert, but it's also keeping Bert in line. And it's controlling the situation without controlling anyone.
100%. Yeah. And her delivery of it is perfect. It doesn't feel too big. It doesn't feel like she totally agrees with Bert. She said it loud enough to be heard, but not like so loud that it looked like she was trying to start a fight. Yeah, it was actually a really clever moment.
Yeah, it really reminded me of one of my aunts. And that's how she is. She just controls the situation without controlling people. And I wish I had that ability to do it in such a diplomatic way that actually works, But my aunt is also that kind of person. Like I could see her in this role. So that might have already been loaded for me,
Loaded is a good choice of words for that.
I realized that as I was saying it. But yeah. You guys have much left in your notes, or?
I think
practically
I've exhausted my notes, except for my recommendations. I think that's pretty much everything. I mean, probably I could talk about it for another 2 hours, but it would all just be, remember that awesome, funny scene when such and such happened.
I mean, we can do that. I love that. Okay, fine. All right. Well, we'll go to Rex then. Chris, you're the guest, so you get to go first. If people loved this, what else should they watch? And should they watch a Western version of this?
Well, I mean, the answer to I'll answer the last question first. Of course, they should. You should watch the first 4 Tremors films. I enjoyed all of them, varying degrees, not as much as the first, but they're all worth seeing. If you're looking for other movies about carnivorous worms, obviously you should watch Dune. You should watch Beetlejuice, and you should watch the obscure one Squirm, which is about giant mutant worms. But more closely related thematically, which I think is kind of fun, is I was trying to think of, is there another story where people go someplace they're not supposed to belong in the middle of nowhere, and then they get attacked by this thing they didn't expect was going to be there, and then have to deal with it? And I thought, yes, there is one. It's an I don't want to say obscure, but it's not one of the more beloved of John Carpenter's oeuvre, and that film is Ghosts of Mars.
Okay.
It is a space western about a bunch of people who show up in a town where everyone's been murdered, and the ghosts of dead Martians take everyone over. And there's something similar about it was not intended to be funny, I don't think, but it is. And so there's a fun tone to it that I think matches this one kind of in an interesting way. And one of them is more of a throwback western in the modern day, and the other one is a futuristic Martian western. But I think that they would make an interesting pairing.
Very nice. I said I was switching my double feature, but I'm not. And I absolutely love that Don accidentally threw out a spoiler for it without meaning to when he said, I love spiders. Arachnophobia and Tremors. Beautiful double feature. Just so much fun together. And I've watched them together a couple times, and I just adore it. So I'm going Arachnophobia on this. Don wants to set a new record. So.
Oh, it's going to be set, dude. I honestly thought you would have said 8-legged freaks, but
I prefer Arachnophobia. 8-legged's decent, but yeah. Arachnophobia wins.
Arachnophobia so perfectly balances the scares and the jokes in the same way that Tremors does.
Oh, 100%. I definitely agree on that one. All right.
If for no other reason, then you should just love the exterminator who shows up.
He's so good in everything though. All right, so let's start it off with big bug movie, Starship Troopers, and when you talk about hubris, as you brought it up, Chris, there's that one hits it hard.
Yes.
Holes, Jaws, Nope, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, old or the new one, San Andreas. Not that I would ever really recommend a movie with The Rock, but he's on a roll right now. So, plus there was a lot of rock, paper, scissors. Bird Box, Earthquake, Critters, and if I mention Critters, it is obligatory for a minute to mention Ghoulies.
Yes.
Lake Placid, The Mist, Anaconda, The Thing, Quiet Place, The Meg, Deep Blue Sea, Predator, and if I mention Predator, you know what's coming next. Prey, El Dorado, yes, the cartoon, Jurassic Park, Eight-Legged Freaks, Slither, Creepshow 2, The Day After, Godzilla -1, War of the Worlds, Footloose, Ghostbusters, and Aliens.
Nice.
I think that kills the old record. I had
Nice.
Beetlejuice and Dune, but the guest beat me too.
I would love to see a crossover. Can you imagine Michael Gross and Reba in Beetlejuice fighting the sandworms? I think.
Oh my God!
Just
that's
so
how they
great.
should start. That's how they should start Beetlejuice too. We've been following these sandworms since Nevada.
Get no argument from me. I'm on board with that. I do like that you put Footloose in there. I'm desperately trying to figure out what the other, besides Kevin Bacon, connection is to that. And frankly, it doesn't really matter because that movie's great. But
he's trying to
here's
find
why I
6
put it in.
degrees without Kevin Bacon. That's amazing.
No, it's because of the vibrations and the dancing, and there was this great moment where the
Now I need another
sandworm and
crossover.
he and the sandworm, the graboid was right there on the sand. He kept picking his foot up and running it over and trying to get it. It was
Oh
a
my
dance.
I
They were engaged in
I feel like
dance.
I'm remembering correctly that he did dance in front of a big, slow-moving farm implement, didn't he? In the barn, wasn't there like a big piece of farm equipment that was slowly moving and he was dancing on it?
Yes, he did dance on a tractor.
All right, so there we go. Tractor's the connection. That's good enough for me. I'm gonna go watch football.
Damn it! There.
Amazing.
Oh my God! And somebody got killed on a road.
Jeez.
Which is super, super rare in cinema.
Oh my. Well, that was fantastic. All right, so let's bring it back to you, Chris. Where can people find you online, buy your books, and all that good stuff?
Yes. So my name, Chris Vander Kaay. Look me up on Amazon because I'm on a bunch of books and I'm not going to remember all of them to tell you. But I will tell you that Spoiler Alert is a great book I did. It's a coffee table book about all of your favorite cliched popular genres, and it's a picture book and it's great. You can grab that one and one of my other 5 or 6 other books that I've written. You can find me on Twitter at CK Vander Kaay. And hopefully keep an eye out. I completed a feature film recently. It's a found footage film called Ask. And I'm getting ready to start submitting it to the festival circuit or find a distributor for it. So hopefully you'll be hearing something about that fairly soon.
Nice. That's exciting stuff. All right. Well, sadly, it's the last season, so this is your last time here. But we have greatly enjoyed having you. And
Most
sincerely,
definitely.
you gave me my favorite werewolf film, as I've already said. Now you gave me a chance to talk about this film. So I just want to sincerely thank you for all the times you've been here, man.
It has been an absolute blast. And just assume that I'm just going to keep calling you guys and talking about movies, even if you're not recording it.
Oh, yeah, we might do that.
Okay.
It's the whole like loading and advertising. That's the bad part. Like the just talking's fine.
Excellent. Because I've got so many wonders to still reference for you guys. So many obscure independent films from the last decade that no one bothered with that I'll bring to light. So
And one day Don will finish his doctorate and then he'll have time to watch all the stuff that you want him to watch.
yeah, well, I'll start
yeah.
making a list now, Don. I got plenty of work for you.
It'll be before the show's over. Let's just put it that way. I'll probably spend all summer watching movies that I've missed out on.
Woohoo!
But in all seriousness, this is I haven't done a ton of podcasts in the last year or two, but I always come when Donald and James let me come back because this is my favorite series to appear on. So I appreciate you guys having me.
Thank you so much.
Indeed. That means a lot. All right. So we'll wrap it up for another week. As always, I am James Sabata.
And I've got a joke, James. So
Yes.
bear with me. What is worse than finding one graboid outside of your little town?
What, Don?
Finding two more. Or we could actually say it's worse for them to find you. But anyway, until next time, everybody.
You know, I'll be honest. I really thought that you were going to pull up the Alice in Wonderland thing that Chris wanted to know, and that's what you were about to ask.
No, I wasn't.
Oh, well.
I should.
Anyway, we'll see you next week here at the Necronomicon.com. We are still vibrating.